University Television and the UALR Department of Theater, Arts, and Dance are pleased to bring you a conversation with Jack Hefner. Our host, Department Chair Jay Raphael. Jack Hefner is a playwright with more than 30 works to his credit. A native Texan, Hefner moved to New York in the mid-70s and formed the off-Broadway theater group, the Lion Theater Company. It was during this time that he wrote his best-known play, Vanities, which ran for 5 years in New York and became one of the longest-running plays in off-Broadway history. Other well-known works include Patio Porch, Running on Empty, Boys Play, and Jumping for Joy. His works have been produced worldwide, including Little Rock. In 2009, Vanities opened on Broadway as a musical. Playwright Jack Hefner.
Hello. Welcome to the University of Arkansas Little Rock's Department of Theater, Arts, and Dance. This week in our Hayslip Theater, we're presenting the annual Fringe Theater event. And for the second year in a row, that event is related to featuring and fostering new playwrights from all over the university. It's a complete student event. It's produced, directed, performed, and written by students in the department and in other departments all across the university. It's also unique in the sense that while for many it may be a first production of their writing, for others it's also the first play they've ever written. So this is an opportunity that may never come again. And we are happy in that we have the support this week of an internationally famous playwright, Mr. Jack Hefner, who's with us here this afternoon, who's come to help mentor, to direct, to provide support and critical response for our playwrights and for the collaborating student directors who have worked with them to develop these small pieces. If I were to run Mr. Hefner's credits for you, it would probably be like the Hall of Fame induction speech. And we'd have to bring up his high school coach, and he'd have to sign metaphorical footballs and things like that. But the reality is that he has had and is having a major life in the theater, and that's what's appealing to us. On the one hand, we can turn to the fact that he had a blazing hit in Vanities, which ran off-Broadway as long as any play has ever run in American theater history in that venue. Indeed, it ran to sold-out audiences for over 5 years. It continues to have relevance and relativity, and people not born at the time discover that play now and understand it and are entertained by it. The other side of the coin is that he's not a one-trick pony, and that he's had this life in the theater in which he has literally written, published, and produced dozens of plays and screenplays, which are equally well known and which have been welcomed and performed in this country and in many other countries all over the land. For us, in a training institution, the idea of a role model, of someone who has made a life for themselves in the theater, who has a craft and a process, and who has found a way not only to have the theater survive for him, but to survive in it, is very impressive and is very important because it offers you a challenge and an option as students, which I think is the most important part of what we do. So I welcome you, Mr. Hefner, to the University of Arkansas.
It's a pleasure.
And we'll talk and chat about various things this afternoon and save some time for you to enter into the conversation as well and to ask Mr. Hefner questions. Jack, the American Theater Wing this year produced a book edited by Ben Hodges, which I really love, and it's titled The Play That Changed My Life. And it's an interview with 19 playwrights about either the play they read or the play they saw or the performance their mother was in, or something that caused them to want to run away and join the circus. And in that sense, I want to pass that kind of question on to you and ask you what it was, what event or events or occurrence or connection made you want to tell stories on the stage.
Well, I know the play, or what I saw that made me want to go into the theater, but I thought I wanted to be an actor. So the play that made me want to be a writer would be more difficult to define. You know, I mean, I think the play or the musical that made me want to go in the theater was when I was a child and saw Annie Got Your Gun. And there was some sort of magic to that as a child that I just, you know, I wanted to be there with them, doing what they were doing. As far as writing, I didn't intend to be a writer when I was in school, or I would have studied writing, which I didn't. I studied everything else but writing. I did some creative writing. But I think the influences of the strong, at that time, probably Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf was the play that I really fell for. I loved, even in high school, I was reading Ibsen, and like most American writers, or the American writers I know, Chekhov was a huge influence. Because I think if you're a really good writer, you're interested in characters, and his characters are so beautiful that I fell in love with them early on and wanted to spent my whole senior year in college working on Treplieff. Just that one character we were assigned one character for a whole year, basically. So, but I didn't know I wanted to be a writer. So I think the influences were coming from being an actor and thinking that's what I wanted to do. And then it fed into being a writer later.
Was there any impulse or request or situation that got you to write the first play, whatever it might have been?
Well, I was lucky in one respect that, which I think it's still happening, but the group of students that I went to college with was a rather extraordinary group. Kathy Bates, Beth Henley, James McClure. These people, some of us got to New York and found that we couldn't get jobs, so we started our own theater company, and I think young people today still do that. Start your own company because nobody will hire you, and so we'll do it ourselves. And so I was part of this theater company, 20 of us put together, and rented our own space in New York, which was still possible then. It's $500 a month seemed like a lot for rent on a theater, but we did it, and for 20 years we held that space. Now it would cost a fortune, you know, but because I had the comfort of that space and a company to work with of young actors, I wrote for the company in some respects. But the first event was actually the death of my father, and it took about 1.5 years to write the first play because I was trying to figure out how I deal with this personal tragedy. And so I turned to paper, and then I would write on it and put it away, and then pull it back out and write on it. And finally, I was courageous enough to send it out to 2 theater companies, New York, the old Circle Rep, which was very famous at that time, and Playwrights Horizons in New York, which is still famous but new then. And oddly enough, the first play I sent out, both companies wanted to do. Amazing that anybody could have that luck, you know. And do it in a workshop situation, but a real performance. And I chose to go with Playwrights Horizons, and then did the second play for Playwrights Horizons. So it was good fortune combined with actually a tragic experience in my life that I decided to work out through the theater and through writing.
How have the channels changed for you over time in terms of the professional venues? Do you run a flag up over your house when the play is finished and say, I've got another one? Do you still have to go through submissions? Do you work within your own network? How have things changed in terms of the fact that people know you're writing and know your work?
I think it's in some ways harder. Maybe it's just the times we're in, you know, that there's not as much new play development, and so much new play development these days. They want to read it. They want staged readings is something completely new. They want to workshop it before they'll ever commit to a production. Part of this is economics. When we first did my play Vanities in New York at our own theater company, it cost $200, the whole thing. Sets, costumes, lights, $200. We moved it off Broadway for $1,000. Where it ran 5 years with the same set and costumes that we built ourselves. by the time that same play got to California, to the Mark Taper Forum, and then to Chicago, the costumes alone were costing $30,000. Same play, same director, same designers. They just get the big budget suddenly to do it. Then suddenly the sweaters aren't coming from Goodwill, they're coming from Saks Fifth Avenue. I mean, this is how it changed, you know. But now, you would think it would be easier, but I think there's not as many places to do it. I think you're lucky, and also it's also a blessing and a curse. You get typed to the kind of play you write. When I first started writing, everyone thought I only wrote about the 1960s and wrote about women in Texas. And then when you suddenly start writing about New York or absurdist pieces or something else, they go, well, this is not in your style. No, it's not my style, because I want to explore in every play I do something new. So the big shock to me was actually it was so easy at the beginning and so much harder later, which was the opposite way from what it normally is. You know, so I think you still get more jobs in this world, in the theater, through connections, through who you know, than sending something out there blind, you know, but that's just my feeling. I think most of the work I've ever gotten has been through, I know somebody who gives the script to somebody, so that's why it's so important to meet people. So important, you never know, you know, even among us. I mean, since I got here yesterday, we're saying, oh, there's a theater that might like your work. And we were talking about this last night. I said, I have this crazy play. I don't know what to do with it. I know someone that's looking for crazy plays, you know. So I think agents don't do that much. They're essential for writers, but they basically do contracts. They basically do deals or set up appointments. It's still the work or you pitching it that's going to get you the job.
Talk with us a little bit. I'm always fascinated by writers, not just, process is too big a word, by their habits. I mean, I'm always interested in, I only write at 2 in the morning. I have to have 3 pencils. I only work longhand, et cetera, et cetera. What is it that has evolved for you that may be habitual and personal, but that's productive?
I'm very much a person that, to my students, do as I say but not as I do, because I have terrible work habits. But I totally believe that, just like my students do, if I have a deadline, I will do it. You know, but it's very hard to motivate myself to do something if I know it's going nowhere, or even if it's a reading. Someone says, I want to read a new play of yours, then I'll go write one. But I, like most people, put things off to the last minute, but I'm thinking about it all the time. I work a lot with Post-it notes, oddly enough. The old screenwriters in Hollywood used to work with, you know, cards, and you'd rearrange the cards for scenes. I've got Post-it notes everywhere with lines or ideas, and then suddenly I begin to arrange these Post-it notes together, and they begin to make something like a collage. And then I'm often, I will go see a painting or something and then get inspired and run home and start writing. Usually I do best when it's fast. I write very fast once I start, but sometimes there's a lot of thinking about it. But sometimes someone will just throw out something in a conversation and it'll spark me and I'll go write. I have bad work habits, but I totally understand why writers have little studios separate from their houses with no telephone and no distractions, because I think I will do anything not to write, you know, and therefore it's a great fear still after 30 years of doing it, or more than 30 years of doing it, of, you know, what am I doing, and do I know how to do it, and what is the reaction going to be, which is exactly the same for young writers. You know, we're all in the same boat. Will they like me? You know, that kind of thing. So I have no good work habits, but once I start, I truly believe you push through. Do not stop. Do not give up. Therefore, I tell my students, and the way I do it is, I may not know what's happening in this part, but I put something happens here. Then I keep going and keep going. Once you have a framework, a beginning, middle, and you may not have the middle, a beginning and end, then I think it's easier. You know, some sort of something to hang it all on. It's just very hard, a blank page for any writer.
Yeah. Do you, if you get the hook, do you write every day then until it's done?
Yes. I will stay up all night. I mean, Vanities, once I spent a year and a half writing the first play about my father, Vanities I wrote in a day and a half. I just didn't stop because I was terrified if I stopped, I would lose it, you know, and I just stayed up and did it. Even now, if it's going, I will not stop it because I'm so afraid the next day I can't call it back up again, you know. So that's why I think even if you're dead tired and don't know what you're doing, keep going until you just can't do it anymore that night.
Hemingway said that what he used to do was get to the last line at the end of the day and not write it so he'd have one to start with the next morning.
That's a good idea. That's actually a very good idea. I don't know. I look forward when I'm working on something to getting back to it every day. But I love rewriting. I love playing with words then and playing with the shape and all of that, which is sort of like the rehearsal process, you know. But writing is a very, you do it in solitude, basically. It's very lonely. And, you know, one of my things I tell my classes too is, you know, you've got to sort of shake your troubles out of the trees there and just keep joggling your head and get these feelings and emotions and out, whatever you're feeling about it at the moment, because it's difficult and it may be upsetting. You may sit there crying. You may sit there laughing, but I do trust, and I write comedy. I mean, everything I've ever written is some sort of comedy, but by that I mean Chekhovian kind of comedy, some of it. That if it makes me laugh when you first write it on the page, it'll make an audience laugh. I trust it, the surprise of it. If I'm forcing it, trying to come up with a joke, it's not going to work. But if it makes me laugh when I write it, then it's going to make an audience laugh 100% of the time.
You are the first spectator.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, if you're a good writer, I think, at least for the theater, that you let your characters do what they will. You give them birth. It's one of these great things where a writer can play God. I mean, you invent people. You give them lives. And then once you've lived with them long enough and really know them, set them free and just let them take you on this ride, which is the fun part.
Oh, great. Do you write, did you ever write by longhand? Did you type before there were computers?
Oh yeah, I wrote by longhand. I used to think like a lot of writers back then, we're not talking that long ago, but back then, that you had to write longhand. That there was this process, and a lot of writers, my favorite screenwriter, a writer I teach in screenwriting class, William Goldman, has a process, but he always goes through, like he wrote Misery and All My President's Men, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and he goes through with colored pens, and that's what I do. From first draft, then I know my first draft, then my second draft is in a red pens. Third, even if I change a word, third draft green, so that you can always go back to the first, and you can always see, you know, how I changed it. Sometimes you can really mess things up with rewrites. But I used to think I had to write it longhand and then type it, because that was the rewrite, you know. Now we're so lucky in some ways to be able to cut and paste on a computer, and I love it, and it saves a lot of time. But I think I missed the process of going from longhand to typing, because that was my second draft, basically. But I don't do it anymore. I take the shortcuts, for sure.
Francis Ford Coppola referred once to collaboration as the sex of creativity. And we talk a lot in this department about collaboration as the sublime thrill, that the opportunity to work with other people in the theater is part of why you want to work in the theater, and that ultimately that loneliness has to cross over for you. Talk with us a little bit about experiences that represent the best of what collaboration has been for you, and you don't have to name names, but any experience in which the collaboration was, how shall we say, less than enjoyable.
Okay. Well, the best situation for me once again, this sort of blessed college group that I had. One was a director who was my college roommate, and I worked with all the way through college, named Garland Wright, who ended up running the Guthrie Theater here in the United States. He directed the first 6 of my plays, and we had this theater company together. And I was lucky enough to have Kathy Bates do the first 5 of my plays. So, you had great people here. But I didn't know it was difficult to collaborate because we've been collaborating all the way since college, doing, you do this for me in my production, I'll do this for you. That stuff you have to do to get things on. So it was just natural in the professional world. I was very lucky because they were both in Vanities. Garland directed it, Kathy was in it, sort of set up all of our careers. I didn't know collaboration was difficult until, oh gosh, I can't think of the worst nightmare. There have been quite a few. One was I was doing I worked with a composer for 2 years, a very famous composer on a Broadway musicals are probably the most difficult because you not only have a director and a writer, you've got a composer, lyricist, writer, director, choreographer. You've got about 5 or 6 people calling the shots and producers telling you what to do. So that's much more difficult. I think the director-writer relationship on a play is so crucial. And even if you fight, as long as you're both fighting to try to make the product better, and it's not ego, and it's not just, I love to fight. If it's all about what are we doing, and how do we make this better, and how do we make it clear, then it's always okay, But if you've just got egos all over the place, I worked on a Broadway musical 2 Broadway musicals that were pretty nightmarish. And one was simply because one was, the musical leader of the pack. And Michael Bennett, who was legendary at the time, did Chorus Line, Dreamgirls, all this, came in to fix it. But Michael was a fairly evil person at heart in some respects. And he dictated a new version of the script to me at 2 o'clock in the morning that I knew from the time he started dictating it to me to go on, that was not going to work, but he was Michael Bennett. He was a god in the theater, and rightly so. And we were playing one version of that show at night at a Broadway theater, rehearsing another version in the daytime to go in 2 weeks later. It went in and played one performance after rehearsing it for 2 weeks, and then went to a third version that he had nothing to do with. Still playing for, it was so difficult. I mean, a paying audience in there and a musical that was supposed to preview for, I think, 4 weeks. In the 8th week of previews, I think the critics said something like, we're coming no matter what. And even till the last minute, there were joke writers the day before we were supposed to open, feeding me new jokes from Hollywood. It was just simply insane.
Have you worked with directors who you believe can satisfy you in terms of having strong dramaturgical abilities? Or do you really feel in the most cases that that's your function also?
I don't think it's my function, and I mean, it would be great if I knew sometimes more about what I'm writing about than I do, but I think a lot of times I look at people looking at my plays in classes and analyzing and stuff, and I thought, that never entered my mind when I wrote this, I didn't have that. I don't think writers at times think as much about what we're writing as the people looking at him or director, but that's what's good about a director. They can say, why did you write this? What does that mean? Or a dramaturg. I think on a period show or anything that's not current, a dramaturg is so necessary. Because I find people, sorry to say, but I find people lazy. They just don't do the research that they should to play a role. Or I will say to students, that play you're directing, who wrote it? They don't even know who wrote the play they're directing. I said, well, maybe if you would go find out something about the writer, you will really understand why that play was written, or where it came from, or the background of that person. So I need someone asking me the same questions I'm sort of asking your students now that I'm here. I never am offended by it, because if I can't answer it, I should be able to, or I'll just say, I don't know, I got to go think about it. But that's really, I shouldn't leave that question unanswered, you know. If it's confusing, I want to know, unless I mean it to be confusing. But I should be able to say that too. So I think the best directors are those that do ask questions. It doesn't have to be a great friendship to have a good director-writer relationship, you know. It just has to be, I think you just want respect, both directions. I don't want anybody to run over me, and I don't want anybody to change anything of mine without permission, and that's where you get really upset, you know, is someone starts rewriting your play. Or I always found my function at school where I teach is I'm the only one that's going to stand up and say, you can't cut that. You can't cut what you're doing just because you want to. It's illegal. It's against the law to do this. And so I may not win, but somebody has to stand up for the writer in those situations. And it is illegal. So.
Do you find that rehearsals are a reasonably active process for you, in terms of that rewriting is something you kind of look forward to in terms of discovery, or that you're pretty secure that what you come to the table with is for the most part going to work?
No, I'm not sure of it at all, but I think these days, because the process now is lots of readings, like I said, lots of let's hear it, lots of, you work out a lot of the problems in advance that you used to not work out, because the first time you saw the actors and heard it was the first rehearsal. Now, this musical I just did, we've been doing we did workshops for years, 2 years, 3 or 4 years, I think total. I don't think it took us more than 3.5 years to get from start to finish, which is quick these days on a show. But the number of readings, you just think, if I have to do one more reading, I'm going to scream, you know, because it, and everybody wants everything for free too, you know, so you're calling in all your favors of actor friends, and they want to hear it. They want to hear it, but you're hearing it too. You know, I trust a lot of that first draft, though, for writers. For myself, if I get lost, go back to the first thing you wrote. That's the initial impulse. And sometimes things can get so crazy. You know, I've had a play that was about a country western singer who's supposed to be living in a very generic apartment and white walls. Part of the reason was because she doesn't know, she can't find her identity, kind of thing. She's trying. And then I went to see the production. She was living in a black loft in Soho, you know, and I'm going, this has nothing to do with, and this was a director's choice that was made without asking me, and I just thought I had to start writing jokes to justify the set. And this was just where communication was out the window, you know. Or I'll go in and literally, I have seen, you know, people, I have stopped productions legally of my plays if they changed it too much.
Are you writing something now you're willing to talk about?
If I was writing something now, I'd be willing to talk about it, but I'm not writing anything at the moment. There's always something cooking, you know, in the back of my head. But anytime I'm teaching, oddly enough, don't write. I can't combine the two. And I teach part of the year, one semester each year, and that's totally when I don't write. Because I think dealing with the number of students I have in their writing and reading everything they write, I just don't feel like going home and writing myself.
It's worth mentioning that Mr. Hefner is teaching at Stephen Austin University in Texas right now, where he teaches playwriting and screenwriting, and also, something we'll talk about, features a very interesting biennial playwrights festival each year, which will be interesting to us. About this teaching business, okay? We could broadly and arrogantly ask you whether you can teach anyone to write, but the more reasonable question is, how do you approach finding the writer in the individual?
Well, I do believe anyone can write. They may not write well, but they can write. I love my beginning playwriting classes. I mean, I was offered a very good job at one time teaching an entire graduate program of playwriting, and I thought, this is not really what interests me, because everyone's got their routine set, and they've learned from the teacher that they came from. But I'm going to be dealing with 5 or 6 grad students, all that don't follow what I believe writing is. And I thought, this is not as interesting to me as getting people at the beginning, and getting people in my classes. Some have written some have never written, and it's basically a workshop, because I think you learn by doing, and I just make them write from the minute they come in there till it's over with. And it's so amazing, because so many of them say, I can't write, and they're writing every day, and there is no fear involved. I mean, I can throw anything at them, and the pens just start. And I'm going, I can't even do that with myself, I'm so proud of them, and they're so dedicated, maybe not to writing, but to the fun that I'm trying to create, that it's to get over their fear, their absolute fear. So that's part of it. Advanced playwriting is different, but I love beginning playwriting. I just love seeing what's going to come out of them, and it's a great joy, I really think it's a trial and error process, in terms of teaching. It's just write something, and some of it's going to be good and some of it's going to be bad, and just don't censor yourself, don't edit yourself, don't get so critical that you're crippling yourself. It's just, I just want them to write, and about 9 times out of 10 something will be good out of what they did. The 10th thing, 9 bad things, 1 good one, and that's what I think it is. That's sort of the process I go through. The exercises, they have different exercises all the time, and usually 2 warm-up exercises of some sort, really off-the-wall exercises, and then a major exercise taken from a painting or a picture or a piece of music I'm playing, something that gets a mood and atmosphere, and then say, write about this, But the first exercise we do is one of the oldest writing exercises of all time. Your pen cannot leave the paper when I say go. And you will keep writing and keep moving that pen. Do not censor what's coming out till I say stop. And usually it's about 10 minutes, and their hands are really cramping. And if I see a pen stop, I scream at them, and make them keep going. And it's shocking how good that first thing will be when they don't stop to think about it and just let it flow. So it's a bit creative writing mixed with playwriting.
If you were to do anything else tomorrow that was not involved with theater, what would it be?
That I was still able to do? If I was 20 years old, I would probably become a dancer, an athlete or something, or even younger. But I would probably go back to what was my first love in the arts, and that was painting. I started out as a painter, and I think that's why some writers write from different places, but mine comes from the visual. I miss painting, and I don't do it anymore, and I haven't done it since I was in my 20s, because I always thought I've got to be working on my theater career. And I think that's one of the things I'm looking forward to, and retirement at some point is picking up the brush again, because I love to paint, but I don't even find time to do it as a hobby now. And that may be because writers are very much, when we're not writing, we kind of beat ourselves up and say, I should be writing all the time, instead of relaxing a little bit. So.
It's interesting, you made me think about that I remember seeing plays that Garland directed at the Denver Center once when he was a guest artist there at the Arena and other places, and he was an extremely sophisticated visual artist. And it's interesting that you talked about that collaboration.
He was so good when we were even in college that the the professor sort of stepped aside and said, there's nothing I can teach this kid. He was that brilliant, and everybody that went to school with him knew he was that brilliant, and you just got out of his way. He directed, I mean, we would go to New York to see shows. I went to school in Texas, and we'd see Marat Sade with Peter Brook directing on Broadway, and go back and do it the next month later without anybody's permission. We'd just do it at school. We didn't know we were supposed to get permission. He directed, I remember beginning directing class, the opening scene of Cyrano de Bergerac, and used the entire department, I think, in the opening scene, so that there wouldn't be anybody in the audience to critique it. You know, so, and it was hilarious how he got around things. You'd say, the department wouldn't let us do something, he'd just go across the street and rent a space and do it. So we learned, we were horrible students. We were mavericks. We would just go against all rules, and I think the department was very happy to get rid of us. I mean, I think I was lacking a half a credit to graduate, and they said, just get out of here, we'll give it to you. Because they wanted us out because we were so much trouble. But it was that spirit of independence that allowed us to start our own company. I mean, we were terrible students, not grade-wise, but I mean just in terms of, I don't know. We didn't listen very well, I have to say, but we did wonderful work. I would never let my students do what I did now. So,
before we finish, if I don't ask you something about Vanities the Musical when this is aired, I will. The inbox of emails will be filled with people who want me to be scarred, and in fact my producer will probably be at the leader of the pack. So I want you to pick any of the following questions that's interesting to you and talk about. Were you approached many times before the Vanities the Musical actually happened? Did you have to be convinced to do this? Were you reluctant in any way? Did the idea of rewriting the conclusion come naturally through what you thought was going to happen, or did this grow out of something else? What really motivated you to take it beyond extending its life? And I don't mean that in a condescending way.
No,
I mean,
no, because you do worry about messing with something that has been so successful for such a long time. I mean, one of the things about the play was it was my second play. I didn't even know I wanted to be a writer. So the play answered the question, what am I going to do with my life? Oh, I'm a writer. Okay. So I was always very protective of it because it not only gave me a career, it gave me an income, but everything that comes after that, you have to go, you know, you have to learn that everything's not going to be successful. You do plays or you write plays because you have a very specific reason for wanting to write it, you know. And but I was very protective of Vanity. So a lot of people, even when we were running off Broadway, wanted to move it to Broadway or make it into a musical. I mean, big name people like Hal Prince and people wanted to move it to Broadway with stars. And I said, I think we're better just leaving it in a small theater where it can run 5 years and stay visible than go to Broadway for 3 months or something. So I never liked the idea of changing it or messing with it. And most of the people that wanted to make it into a musical, it's a simple 3-character play, wanted to make it into Grease and add all the boys and the unpopular girls and all of this. And I said, well, that's not what this play is about. This play is a sociological study at a very specific time in America where we were handing women the wrong set of rules for life. It could have been men or women. But I just think if you lived through the 60s into the 70s, the sort of loss, the Kennedy assassination, the Vietnamese War, the women's movement, everything, the civil rights movement, everything in this country changed in that time period. And that's what was important. We had to rewrite the rules for living and dealing with each other. So when someone approached me about the musical, I said no every time. And then someone approached me and said, well, what if we just, I said, I'm only interested in keeping it 3 characters like it is. This producers set me up with a composer lyricist, and he said, well, if I just write 2 sample songs, will you listen to them? I said, fine, because someone had tried to do a musical of it before without my permission, and I said, well, go to it. If you want to write the whole thing, and then I say no, and that's what happened. They wrote the entire thing, and I said, you know what, it doesn't work, I don't want it, I don't like it. But this guy, David Kirschenbaum, who's in his early 30s, and I thought it was great that a younger person should be writing it with a more of a feeling of today's music, even though a lot of it is period sounding. He wrote 2 songs, and I thought he was so respectful to the underlying work and to the characters. And one of his songs in particular said it better than I said it in the play. And I thought, wow, you know, he literally took this huge chunk of a play, pages, and put it into a song. And it was great. So we started working, and it was a joyous collaboration. You know, he has never been less than respectful to the material and to me, and also does his research. He does his research before he writes something, you know, of the period. And so he sort of convinced me because he was so good, you know. Then to go beyond was a very strange thing, because the play stops when they are in their 20s in the 1970s, and I thought, you know, I was exactly the age of the characters in the play when I wrote the play. What was happening in the play was what was happening outside the theater. So the argument sort of went from the theater to the outdoors, you know. It was of its time. So it was shocking to me that the play is still done, because I had to go back and find what is the universal chord. What makes older people and younger people like this play? And it's because it's a play about friendship. And we've all had friends in high school or in part of our lives that we said, well, we'll be friends forever. And then something happens, you know, whether it's separation or you don't see them anymore. And so I had to find the universal chord. And so we started working on it. And I said that when I wrote the play in the cynical 70s, I was very cynical. And at the end of the play, these 3 women have 3 different opinions about life and where they've gone in life, even though we're given the same upbringing. That's why they're dressed alike in the first act. They talk alike, they think alike, they are alike, and then they begin to have different ideas. And I thought it was okay to say, you know, to hell with friendship. We're not going to be friends anymore. But then when I got older, now in my life, I realized, no, you know, those people who were your friends then are still your friends. So it was, and it's the kind of thing that can make me cry, basically, because you realize they may not be your friends you call every day. These are the friends that turn up at funerals. These are the friends that turn up at weddings. These are the friends that know your family. They know where you came from. You need no explanation to them, ever. And you may see them, and I still have them in my life. Kids that I went to high school with will show up, you know, and you go, wow, we have a history that you don't have to even begin to tell you a life story. So I thought, you know what I wrote at 28 when I wrote the play? I don't believe it anymore. I don't believe it. I believe friendships survive as opposed to friendships end. Good friendships. Friendships that are built on even not getting along. So the whole new ending of the play is sort of about these women have gone to hell and back, and they're now in their 40s. They've really changed. And what they've got from their past is really each other, you know? And I think that's a huge statement. The people you need will always be there, is the final song of the show, the final lines of it. And I believe that's true because of your history. You know, I mean, you can have falling outs that can't be repaired. But I think if your falling outs are just because you grow in different ways, it's different. I've got my best friends from high school and college are still my friends, you know, basically. And that doesn't have to do with nurturing. It just has to do with the fact that we grew up together. We know each other. You know, we don't have to explain anything. So it was really a change of mind on my part about what the play is saying 30 years later. Very, very odd. I've never heard anyone say that about their own work, that I changed my mind about the message. So.
That's great. Good. Thank you.
All right.
Let's turn to you for a moment, and based on what you've heard this afternoon and the work you may have done with Mr. Hefner, are there things you'd like to ask? No question is too naive. Ask away. Yes? You want to come down to the mic, and that'll help us ultimately? Thank you.
Hi. What really changed your mind about the friendship thing? Like, what happened?
I think it's just living longer. You know, I think it's totally that. I think it's that the older I got and realized these people that I was horrible to and we'd had fights were still around. You know, the fact that, and I think it's just that very thing about if you invest part of your life into someone, you know, that they're still part of you in some respects. I always thought this play, basically when I wrote it, was just three sides of my head arguing out existence. Because the three women in the play, one of them does what her parents and society has told her to do. The other one is a complete rebel. And the third one is sort of, what am I going to do with the rest of my life when you get in your 20s and go, okay, I've had my fun and I've done what my parents wanted, but who am I? And so I said, when I wrote the play, it was just me, the argument of my existence, you know, completely. And I think there is, so they never were real people to me as much as they were three parts of me on that stage, you know? And then maybe, you know, I just took the liberty at this point to sort of change them and sort of make them forgiving. I think forgiveness is so important, and I didn't believe that at 20-something. Oh, to hell with them, I can get new friends. No, you gotta learn how to forgive people and work things out. And I didn't know that at a young age, you know? I thought I could just do anything I want to and find new friends. But I think it's important to realize what's important to you, you know? And so these women were never as real to me as characters as they were what I was, you know, I gave birth to them as characters, but they were all me, you know. They could have been three guys. The fact I made them women was very calculated by the time the play was written. There were no plays in the American theater at that time, very few, that had a cast of women. That probably Man in the Moon Marigolds, Paul Zindel's play, and Ladies of the Alamo are the only ones I can think of past Claire Booth Luce's The Women. American theater producers did not believe you could put three women on stage and it'd be interesting. And I mean that. They did not believe it. They did not believe that a woman could open a movie. You know, only Barbra Streisand at that time could open a movie. Now you've got all these women, Angelina Jolie and Julia Roberts and Sandra Bullock, that can open a movie. So all the plays that were being written about that era were for men. And it was about sticks and bones, and all these plays about the Vietnam War and about how serious it was and how Americans were such good soldiers and all this. I wrote a play about what I thought the majority of Americans were like. They didn't care. They don't care now about what's going on in the world. So it was a political statement on my part. Now I think people see it or see the musical and they don't get the politics, and I miss that because I wrote it from a deep, burning question in my head, you know, about, I wrote about people who didn't care. When they heard Kennedy was assassinated, they were more worried about the football game going on that night, which was most of the people I knew, unfortunately. It's hard to believe it, you know, at your young age, I think how it was. But maybe you know people like that too, that don't care about the world they live in. So it was a big political statement, you know. And so if anybody was going to change the message, only the writer, I think, has the ability or the right to do it, I changed the whole message totally. But that's because I've grown up and learned a little bit more. Hopefully, I don't know. Does that answer it?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So here we talk a lot about like the creative process, and you told us how you do exercises with your students. But I was wondering, what do you do that inspires you to write, or how do you go about if you don't have an idea in the back of your head? Like, do you just sit down and think, oh, I can do this, and this will help me start writing?
No, I tell my students, go take a walk. Get out of the house. That's basically what I do. If I really feel stuck, I go out, I listen to the world around me. I get inspired by people. I'll hear something funny, a conversation, you know, or just a situation I observe. I make my students go out and observe people, you know, and eavesdrop on conversations. I'm surprised some of them haven't been slugged, you know, from writing down conversations they hear. But I've written some, I go to a museum, go to a place, you know, a place where they're playing music, some place to surround myself by the arts. I do my best work thinking of what to write about when I'm watching somebody else's play. Oddly enough, they inspire me. You know, watching the student plays last night, it's like going to church for me, you know, because it reaffirms what I believe. And it makes me want to go home and write. They inspire me. Other writers inspire me. Good theater inspires me, but nature can inspire me. You never know where inspiration is going to come from. So just go take a walk. This is what I tell my students. Get out of the house, go somewhere. Because I think the worst thing is just sitting home alone, that solitude and getting all anxious, you know, and beating yourself up and say, I can't do this. I don't know what I'm doing. Just get out, you know. And you don't have to write every day to be thinking about it, you know. And take notes, but I just don't know where inspiration is going to come from. That's why I got to keep the channel open all the time for stuff coming in. You know, and sometimes there's some great, I was stuck one time writing a play, really stuck, and my good friend Tina Howe, who's a wonderful writer, and if you don't know her work, read her work. She's crazy beyond belief, and said, you know, and this is a famous quote from Wendell Berry too, about when you are stuck, sometimes the best writing will start. When you're having an easy time, may not be the best time. When you reach a roadblock and have to find your way around it, that may be the most interesting way to go. I've always said, you know, is that whole thing about if I want to go from here to downtown, what's the easiest street to go on, the quickest way to get there? Well, that may not be the most interesting way to get there. So the easy way is oftentimes not the most interesting way. And when you reach a block, then you may have to take a detour. And the detour is what is really interesting. You know, anytime you take the back roads, it's much more interesting than the interstate. So, so that's part of it. I think roadblocks and being blocked can be helpful. So don't look at it as a bad thing, okay?
Thank you.
That's what I do. I go take a walk.
We often say to actors that the improvisation truly starts when you've exhausted everything you can do quickly and habitually.
Yeah.
And now you're at the place where you have to improvise.
Absolutely. That's when the real work begins. And the interesting work, I think. Not always, but most of the time.
How do you put a price on your art? And what was that price? And on top of that, how has that price changed, if it has, from when you started writing up until now?
Prices are set. You know, the prices are set by Samuel French. The prices are set by Dramatist Play Service, what you're going to pay. But and your agent works it out too. But I think I've seen writers also that overprice themselves, and I've seen writers that were not as interested in the work as they are for the money. And I think that's when I lose a little respect for them. We all have to make a living, but I learned somewhere along the way that sometimes there are things you do for love and sometimes there's things you do for money. And I didn't think I could do anything except those things I was really in love with, the plays, the things I had to write, things I wanted to write. No, I learned I could write episodes of TV series, and writing one episode of Designing Women or some TV series would give me enough money to support me the rest of the year to write the things I love. So it's, you know, it's a trade-off. I think for actors it's so hard, you know, because actors are really used and abused in this business. So I'm always happy when an actor gets on a TV series and can make some money finally, you know, after serving their, you know, all those years making nothing. So I think I've been incredibly lucky to make a living as a writer, and I've tried writing different mediums, you know. I'm not very good at fiction. I tried that, but I never gave up on something until I tried it. I said, well, I'll try it. You know, I'll try writing a book. I'll try doing this. And the theater's where I feel the most comfortable. After that, probably episodic television, but only because a situation comedy is basically a one-act play. You know, it's a little play. Long-form television is completely different, but I felt very comfortable writing sitcom because it's a one-act, basically. So and it's based on dialogue more than situation, you know. So, but I don't really set the price. If someone called and said, I want to do a play of yours that nobody else is doing, has ever wanted to do, I'd fly myself there in a minute and pay them probably to do it. So I think it's difficult because you have to make a living. Yeah.
Ultimately, poverty is not romantic.
No. I'm not very good at fiction. I tried that, but I never gave up on something until I tried it. I said, well, I'll try it. You know, I'll try writing a book. I'll try doing this. And the theater's where I feel the most comfortable. After that, probably episodic television, but only because a situation comedy is basically a one-act play. You know, it's a little play. Long-form television is completely different, but I felt very comfortable writing sitcom because it's a one-act, basically. So and it's based on dialogue more than situation, you know. So, but I don't really set the price. If someone called and said, I want to do a play of yours that nobody else is doing, has ever wanted to do, I'd fly myself there in a minute and pay them probably to do it. So I think it's difficult because you have to make a living. Yeah.
Ultimately, poverty is not romantic.
No.
If you would never have been considered successful, or the things that you wrote never went anywhere, would you continue to write? Would you still be writing if you did not find success in writing in the beginning? And also, do you consider yourself talented or just lucky and educated?
I think I would not have continued, oddly enough. I would have probably continued for a few more years, you know, but I think I was the type of theater person because I started out as an actor after being an artist. When I got into theater, I did everything. I mean, I was an actor, and then I was saying, you know, by 23, I was in a Broadway show and had my equity card and all this stuff, and I thought, I don't really want to be an actor. All I really wanted to do was be in a Broadway show, and that's not why you become an actor. An actor is a lifelong journey of learning, and that wasn't interesting to me. I was a stage man. I did everything, you know, and as I went down the list of theater jobs, I began to check them off. Okay, done that. Don't want to do that for the rest of my life. Don't want to do. So I think being a writer was the last thing on the list, and I tried it, and only the success sort of encouraged me to go on. And I began to understand that it wasn't, you know, just luck. It was hard work, and the longer you do it, the harder it becomes, I think, because you set up more challenges for yourself. And it's, but I don't think, in terms of talent, I think I'm very good at doing certain things. And I think this is important for artists, is to learn what you can do and learn what you can't do, and it's okay to not be able to do everything, you know. There are things that people write that I love what they write, and I look at it and say, I could never write that in a million years, you know. And that's good, because I think I suffered at the beginning by taking on jobs. I was so flattered that someone would offer me this movie, or flattered that someone would want me to do this, take the job, and then realize I was the wrong person to be doing that job. And that does you more damage, I think. But I think you can't know that at the beginning. But I think, you know, okay, writers can't write everything. You write what you're interested in. You write what, you know, sparks something in you. In every TV series I worked on, I had to write for TV series I liked, you know, and that I thought I had something to say, or I thought I could make it funny. I think it's reassessing before you take a job. Okay, thank you very much for the job offer, but if I'm going to fail at this, and I shouldn't be doing it, don't just take the job, you know. Really begin to know your limitations are not necessarily bad things to know. This is what interests me, this is what I can write, and do a good job doing. Now, if you're going to do something experimental that's outside your range, that's fine, you know. But I don't want to do that and be paid for it until I sort of do the experiment on my own. I don't think I'm a great writer. I think, you know, I think what I've learned is to write something I really believe in, and write something from the heart, and write something that, to me, says a statement about the world I live in. It says some kind of message beyond just being stupid, or, you know, that I think a writer has to be concerned about the world I live in, and also you struggle as a writer to find your own voice and your own tone and all this, and that's a lifelong journey, you know, in terms of, I know I write comedy, I know I write characters well, I know I write dialogue well, but I'm never going to write the greatest American play, you know. And I don't think I ever wanted to write the greatest American play. I'm not Eugene O'Neill, you know, I know that. And I think you count your lucky stars that you have a career in the theater, you know, and I'm very, very lucky to have been doing things I enjoy my whole life, basically.
Okay. As an undergraduate, I took a creative writing class, and after halfway through the semester, a student asked the teacher, based on all the work we'd done, that's what the assumption was in asking, can you tell us who you think in 15 years will be a writer? And the teacher said, that's very easy to answer, any of you that are still writing. And, you know, for him, it wasn't the measure of success, it was the measure of discipline and desire. Hopefully success would come, but it was the act that mattered.
And I'm sure, you know, the best American plays ever written are sitting on a shelf somewhere. Mm-hmm. And the best, read by literary managers, possibly at theaters, and rejected. The best screenplays, the best movies you'll ever see are sitting on a shelf, bought by studios and never made. Someone, I think it was William Goldman, once again said, you know, if you were a really smart movie executive, you'd hire some young people to go in there and read all those scripts you bought over the years and never made, and you would probably find the best movies to make for the next 10 years, you know, because they're all, that's one reason that I love the theater so much as a writer. In the theater, as you know, writers own their own work. No one will ever own that work but you. I mean, you control its destiny. In movies and television, you do not. It's owned by the studios. You don't even have the copyright on it. So it has to do with power. It has to do with the one place that a writer can sort of make their own decisions and control the destiny of their work, which we're, you know, playwrights can do that. And that's the joy of being a playwright as opposed to a movie producer. If you're a movie producer, writer, you better try to be the producer too. You know, because they can fire you at any minute. They cannot fire the writer in the theater on a play. On a musical, they can. The producer owns a musical, but a writer owns a play. So it's interesting.
Well, I want to thank you for your generosity
pleasure.
and for sharing with us, as well as the whole package of your being with us this week. And thank you for coming and for your questions. And we think this is the kind of project to which we can have a continued devotion, and we appreciate that you're helping us grow it.
Oh, well, it's been a thrill, and I was so pleased with what I saw last night, and you're really on the right track of developing young writers and getting the university involved. And it's a wonderful idea, and I'm inspired to go back to where I work and try to get them to follow your example. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.